Jay, that's strangely close to Daniel Jones from the Giants. Daniel, is that you? Beat the Chiefs. Show me. If the Broncos and Russell Wilson can show me that they can beat the Chiefs, then I will start believing.
The crowd up. And so are this defense, and Kansas City won't snap the ball again. The Denver Broncos have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs.
Dave Montgomery and the Lions, former Bear, gonna make this his revenge game for sure. David Montgomery gets the touchdown that ices the game. No! And there's the flag. There's flags. There's flags. There's flags. There's flags. Snap. Hold. Kick.
Denver wins! Denver wins! Let's go!
They're open. No!
What happened? Oh shit.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the only football podcast. Tonight, we are talking recap of the divisional matchups over this past weekend. A lot of upsets. Well, really just one huge upset that happened. So we're going to be talking about those games. Ben Johnson to the Bears, baby. We're getting Ben Johnson as the head coach. We're going to talk a little bit more, go into depth on that. And of course, we're going to end it off with the Chives with Kyle. Oh, let's get it. America is football.
Football is America. And if you don't like it, you can kiss your candy ass. For the moment in time, I'll give it 10. Oh my god! No! You loved it.
30 to 27.
No!
Chiefs win. Chiefs
No!
win 30 to 20. Woo!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Only Football Podcast. I'm Kyle, and that's Rick.
I'm Rick, let's go.
The day has come. The moment is here where Bears fans around the world can unite. It's a very interesting situation where Bears fans have this dream of getting a head coach to a rival team. Normally, you would be like shitting on your rival's coaching staff, the head coach, the OC, but it wasn't a Packer. I feel like if he was a Packer OC, Bears would be like, we don't want him. Fuck him.
Yeah,
But
we tried that already.
the Lions, though, it's like you just can't dispute what they've been able to do the last couple years under Ben Johnson. I mean, one of the most, if not best offensive play callers the last couple years. I'm not going to say in the game. I'll say in the last couple years. Now, Detroit, a ton of weapons. He's had a ton of weapons to work with. He's going to have a ton of weapons to work with in Chicago. That's the plan. That is the way it is. What are your feelings initially? I know you're excited about it, but give me a bigger picture here of what this means for Chicago.
Well, bigger picture is that throughout this process is the Bears front office, GM, CEO, president finally did the, obvious, and you know what I'm going to say? They did the obvious move, and that's pick the best guy. This is not something that the Bears have been known to do in the past, in reference to picking the best available person or who would be looked at as the best possible candidate to be the next head coach. The Bears always do this thing where, there's an obvious front runner, maybe one or two other B+, A- level guys, and then there's like C, D, E, and then find like Z fucking candidates. They always go for like that C and D type of candidate. That's what Eberflus was. To be honest, that's what Nagy was. Nagy did win Coach of the Year, so he's got that on his resume. That's what John Fox was when they got him. That's what Tressman was when they got him. This is how the Bears have operated for too long of a time, and they finally make the correct decision with Ben Johnson. And look, at the end of the day, for however long he's signed, if he fulfills the contract, if he's not good at the end of his contract or if he's getting run out of town by Bears fans, guess what? You can't look back at this and say the Bears went for the fourth, fifth, sixth best guy. They went for the number one guy in a lot of people's eyes. So just like Caleb Williams, you went for the best possible person for this specific position, and it's going to turn out how it turns out. Now, looking forward for Ben Johnson, this just means that the offense is going to be an NFL type of offense. You know, maybe have a Caleb Williams who's going to pass for 4,000 yards, 30 plus touchdowns. There's going to be some sort of semblance of creativity. There's going to be some semblance of what's the word I'm looking for? Just stability in that building, because the Bears gave Ben Johnson the bag. They fucking gave him probably what's a blank check to a lot of us. Now, obviously the details are going to come out later as to what the contract was and how long the contract is for. But regardless, this just means that the Bears are finally seemingly moving in the right direction with the hire of Ben Johnson. Caleb Williams was on the podcast with that the St. Brown brothers do, Amon Ra and Equanimous Brown, St. Brown do. And he was saying, look, selfishly, when asked about what he wants in his next head coach, he's like, selfishly, I want an offensive guy that I could build for a decade plus, that we can be together for a decade plus. Ben Johnson is what, like 35 years old, something like that. He's one of the youngest head coaches, probably, going into next season. He's like late 30s, I believe, mid to late 30s. Regardless, he's got time to do this with Caleb Williams. He's got time to do this with DJ Moore, with Roma Dunze, with Cole Kmet. The only thing is now, one, who's he bringing on to his staff? And there's a lot of names being thrown out there that are very intriguing and very interesting. One of them being an offensive line coach from the Detroit Lions. Next is, how are Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles going to work together in this next draft and free agency to assemble a cast and a team that looks and can operate like Ben Johnson's Lions offenses have operated for the last 3 seasons, when they've been top 5 and probably best offenses overall in the NFL for those 3 years. They have been on top of their game for a long time. So those two things are going to be very intriguing. And also, can he take Caleb Williams and get him to that next level, meaning playoffs, Super Bowl, MVP type of status for Caleb Williams? I mean, 4,000 yards, 30 plus touchdowns is probably step one with Caleb Williams and this offense. But how can we get from where we are now, second year Caleb Williams and a cast of really good skill players on offense, and how can we get to the Super Bowl and MVPs and top offenses in the league? So those are the things that Ben Johnson brings. Obviously, there's a lot of positivity in terms of outlook that Bears fans and really a lot of people in the NFL are thinking about with Ben Johnson there. I mean, he walked into the room, all the employees, I don't know if you've seen the video, but he walked into Hallis Hall and the employees are clapping. They're clapping him up, like, welcome Ben Johnson. And he goes on to say, like, hey, can't wait to meet and get to know each and every one of you. Sorry, I cut off there. The most important thing is, how can we as a staff, meaning everyone, from the cooks to the personnel department, how can we show support to that locker room, to all those players, to get these playoffs, to get these wins, to get to the Super Bowl? We have to do our part in order to show them that we are supporting them 100%. And I mean, that's a great first impression, man. He comes from Dan Campbell, who is clearly a leader of men type, who commands a room, who definitely commands respect. And I think that right there showed that Ben Johnson can work a room really, really well. So any questions there? I don't think, I think we're answered with that kind of that introduction there at Hallis Hall. But man, this is an exciting time to be a Bears fan, and honestly, like I said at the beginning, the Bears finally made the correct decision, went for the best guy to build with their franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams and their franchise players, the other skill positions on the offense. And again, the names that are being thrown out there in terms of what his staff is going to look like are really, really good. So I am excited, man, and I'm very hopeful for the future with Ben Johnson.
Yeah, there's just so much to break down as an outsider, as somebody that's not a Bears fan.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different things. All the positives are, for me, number one, he came from Detroit, who had a long history of losing, and he
Mm-hmm.
knows what it takes to turn a franchise around that has been just way underachieving for way too many years in a row. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that is a bonus, because you could say, "Oh, Dan Campbell turned it around," but he was next to him when it happened. So he knows what
100%.
the ingredients are. He was there when the chef cooked it. So
Mm-hmm.
now he knows what those ingredients are. That's a really big positive. The
Mm-hmm.
second big positive is that the Detroit Lions are ranked as the 20 20. I just had it. They're not a rich team. They're the 25th
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
ranked team in money. Now, I don't think people realize how important this was. I brought this up because you mentioned the blank check. The
Mm-hmm.
blank check thing. Um, Different teams have different money, and although the cap is set as the same for everybody, when you have rich owners, it allows you to pay, contracts up front, so then you save
Mm-hmm.
money on the back end, and you can manipulate the salary cap in ways that other teams can't. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
the Green Bay Packers, who never pay anybody, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what Aaron Rodgers was so mad about. But keep in mind, they're the poorest team because they don't have an owner, right? They're
Yep. Yep.
publicly owned. They're a nonprofit since 1923. So they don't have the ability to do some of the things that the Rams and the Seahawks and the Broncos can do. The Bears are the 28th poorest team. We're still talking about
Yeah.
wealthy people, but out of 32, they rank 28. So you're like, okay, how does that come into play when it comes time to pay people and building a roster and all of those dynamics that come into play? Well, at least Ben Johnson's not coming from the Denver Broncos, where it's like, hey, we had the richest owner in all of sports. We just paid everybody up front. They found a way, not being wealthy, to have the amount of talent that they had built
Mm-hmm.
through the draft. And going into this season, the Lions are top 10 in the NFL with $57 million available. You wouldn't think that when
Mm-hmm.
you consider how talented they are. You would expect them to be down towards where the Eagles are at like 20 something. But no, that's not the case. So that brings me to the question mark. How much power is Ben Johnson going to have? That is the ultimate kicker here.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think you can have a great coach that knows everything about winning to come in with a good roster, and if you don't give him the right amount of power, doesn't ultimately do any good, because
Mm-hmm.
he needs to be able to make the decisions. We've seen Jerry Jones do this for a long time. What
Mm-hmm.
this hiring of Ben Johnson is going to do ultimately, not just for Bears fans, but for all of NFL fans around the world, it's going to tell us if the Bears' issues are deeper than we think. Because if you can
Yep.
hire the perfect coaching candidate and something can't get fixed, are we supposed to believe that this guy can't call plays anymore? Are we supposed to believe the players can't play? Are we supposed to believe Ryan Poles, who's made countless great moves since taking over, is a bad GM? Obviously not. So this should be, in my opinion, a home run. It's
Yep.
going to really depend on Ben Johnson, outside of Dan Campbell, establishing himself as a head coach and what that looks like. We've seen really good coordinators Josh McDaniels, one of the
Mm-hmm.
best offensive coordinators. I mean, a home run head coach. He's
Yeah.
been a part of Super Bowls. He's been the play caller for Tom Brady for the last decade. And then he gets hired to the Denver Broncos and he's terrible. Then he
Mm-hmm.
goes back to being an OC, wins Super Bowls again, then goes to the Raiders. He's terrible. So, like, this does happen in the NFL where Josh McDaniels, when he was hired, it was a no-brainer. Like, of
Mm-hmm.
course it's going to work. He's been under Belichick for the last, what am I missing? Leader of men. And that was just not Josh McDaniels' thing. Now, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that's going to be the case here because Dan Campbell is way more of a likable person than Belichick was. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Belichick just had, like, it doesn't surprise me that there were practices going on in the building, like, Brian Flores coming from New England and saying what he said about Tua, this kind of like different way of doing things that is borderline just not appropriate. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
surprise me at all. But that is not what we've been hearing about Detroit. The two
Mm-hmm.
best coaches, as far as the young coaches, in my opinion, I think these are going to be the two improved teams next year. The Bears, because they got Ben Johnson, and then it's going to be the Jaguars, who are going to be a playoff team next year because they're going to end up hiring Liam Cohen, who's
Mm-hmm.
actually my favorite in this cycle for the only reason being, and I mean the reason that he's number one for me, is because of what he's done with Tampa Bay. I could understand a lot of coaches having success in the Lions organization under
Mm-hmm.
the circumstances with the team and the head coach and a great defensive coordinator and one of not, if not two top 7 running backs, both on your roster with weapons and star tight ends and a Super Bowl quarterback. Like, yeah, the Lions had success. Who's surprised? I mean, Penei Sewell, that offensive line, like there's no holes on the team. Like, of course it worked. The Bears have a roster that's very similar to that on paper. The offensive line needs to be addressed, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe that's going to be the first thing that he does. And that'll give you an idea if he's the right guy or not. Because every coach that is worth their salt, when they come into a place, they all try to build the team from the inside out. They don't worry about getting more weapons. Oh, let's get $100 million for Tyreek Hill. Who cares if you can't give your quarterback time? Sean
Mm-hmm.
Payton, Jim Harbaugh, any coach, like I said, that is knows what it takes to win in this league, knows that it starts in the trenches. And the Bears were 60 sacks last year? I mean,
65, something
six,
like that.
65 sacks. I mean,
Yeah.
these numbers are ridiculous. So it doesn't matter if you bring in this coach or the weapons if you don't fix the line. And trust me, if you and me know that, so does your new head coach.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at Liam Cohen, he's gonna be the Jaguars head coach. I'm telling you right now. When you look at what he did with the Rams under McVay, this is another guy that you like a lot because of the coaches that he's under, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I got Ben Johnson, who's been under Dan Campbell. That's a plus. I got Liam Cohen, who's been under McVay. That's a plus. But Liam Cohen leaves and goes to Tampa, and then he's under the Todd Bowles. And it's like, is Todd Bowles really like Sean McVay? Come on. Like, no, he's
Right.
not. And he kind of established himself with Baker Mayfield as like, look, I'm that guy. Look what I've done to the Bucs offense. Top 5 in points, top 5 in scoring, in almost every metric. We're top 5 with Baker Mayfield. Not saying Baker's not, a really good quarterback, but still, like, I feel like that's a guy that pulled the most out of his team. Ben Johnson, we're going to see. We're going to see what he does with the Bears. I think the Bears, though, might not even be the best example of this because of how loaded they were with talent. Like, there's a reason that they had
Mm-hmm.
a 10-win projection with a rookie quarterback last year. And that
Yeah.
was because of how talented they are. So, I mean, it's like, in a way, even if Ben Johnson can't do that to the level Liam Cohen did, he might not need to because of the amount of talent that is just raw talent on the team ready to be used and played with. So, like, I don't really see a scenario where this trade doesn't work out for the Bears. I really don't. I just like there's certain teams like they just kind of struggled massively for so long that it's like you start to wonder like if you can draft the best quarterback, a home run quarterback that's the next Patrick Mahomes, and you can, I mean, I remember thinking if the Bears draft Caleb Williams and they don't have a winning season with that roster, I'm just going to believe that the Bears' problems are unsolvable until they prove
They're
me wrong.
cursed. It's cursed, dude.
Yeah, so like I feel like that's where a lot of people are at right now. I don't think it's like they're hating. Maybe some are. I don't feel that way about like I'm a hater, but I do feel like I'm just like after what happened last year, I'm just like, we'll see. I'll wait.
Yeah.
I'll wait before I'm like Bears 10 wins minimum. I'm not going there. I do think it's the right move, and that's all you can ask for as a fan is did my team make the right decision? It does appear that that's what happened, and that's got to be a good start.
Yeah, and it's a great start. The whole like how much power is he going to be given? I think that was made clear during his Zoom call or Zoom interview, whatever, with the Bears because it had to have been. There's no face to faces until after the division round is over. They lost on Saturday. He was hired on Monday. So all of those things, I think for him in his mind were kind of put to bed. The power dynamic between the Bears front office and Ryan Poles and ownership, president, CEO, all that stuff to him in his mind was kind of like, okay, I kind of see now that what a lot of the things were saying, because once the season was over for the Bears, it looked like Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren. It looked like Kevin Warren was like the parent and Ryan Poles was the kid who just did something bad during that press conference. He looked defeated. He didn't look as confident as he usually does. So
Really?
it looked really, really bad.
Ryan Poles?
Ryan Poles, yeah. And so that was blown up by a lot of Chicago insiders, beat writers, the NFL media was beating that up. Like, dude, this does not look good, like a good place to be. And so after all that was said, you go on, you talk to these head coaches, and for Ben Johnson, it seemed like a couple things. One, that whole thing was basically squashed or basically settled. Like, hey, Kevin Warren's, obviously there's going to be reports coming out probably soon, but it seems like Kevin Warren is going to be focusing on the money, the stadium, that stuff. Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson are worrying about the football decisions. Now that's what I can only assume happened.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Just for context, when we tried to hire Sean Payton, we brought him in for an interview. The first interview was with the Walter Penner ownership group, and then you had Sean Payton, and then you had George Payton, the GM. The second interview, George Payton wasn't allowed in the room. And the same thing happened where like all the Bronco fans were like, oh my God, they were like, the adults are talking, get out of the room for a second, because Sean Payton, in that moment, like there's only one reason that happens. It doesn't matter who it is. It's because that head coach wants to say, how much power am I going to have? What is the relationship between me and this general manager going to be? Because that is a key factor in whether I'm taking this job or not. So like, I'm not saying that Ryan Poles, maybe he wasn't sad. Maybe it was just like pictures, but maybe he didn't.
But it was his general like appearance. It looked like if you and I were sitting at a table at a conference room, right? And I'm just kind of like this, hands on the table, just kind of like shoulders down a bit, and you're kind of standing up, shoulders back a little bit and talking for, let's say it was a 20-minute press conference. You talked for 17 minutes of that, and then it felt like you let me talk for those last 3 minutes. That's what the appearance was,
Really?
And that's, for the most part, that's kind of how it went. Kevin Warren was talking the most, and Ryan Poles was like, at one point, had like a 10 to 15 second silence because of the question he was asked about Shane Waldron. He was not expecting another Shane Waldron question. And it just seemed like, oh man, the power dynamic has clearly shifted. When
I
Kevin
don't think
Warren,
this is good though. I mean, you got Ryan
but that's what
Poles.
it was. That's what it was. Well,
Yeah.
we're talking about beginning of January, end of the season. They just beat the
Oh, I thought you were
Packers.
talking about yesterday.
No. End of season, like right when the season ended. So that right there, up until the Zoom call with Ben Johnson last week, it seemed like, oh my God, like this might actually be a problem to lure a guy like Ben Johnson or anybody who's looking for kind of how you're saying with Sean Payton and his power in terms of decision making for football operations. That's going to be a huge issue. But it seemed like once they had the Zoom call, all of that was squashed. It's like, hey, this is how we're going to operate. And nobody's going to step over the line. No, we're not going to fucking do this. We're not going to do that. We're not going to fucking put each other's hands in each other's pots. It is going to be this, this, and this. Now, the other thing, too, is Ben Johnson has been eyeing the Chicago job since last season. Since after like they realized that the Bears were going to have the number one pick. They were going to pick Caleb Williams. They had DJ Moore. They also had another top 10 pick wherever they wanted to go there. He wanted the job, but the Bears decided to stick with Eberflus. He went back to Detroit. He stayed with Detroit, I should say. And what is crazy is that he accepted this job Monday, not even like a full 3-4 days after they were eliminated. It was a day and a half, probably less, after he and the Lions were sent home against the Commanders in the playoffs. So you know that there was an actual desire to go to the Bears. He could have had the face-to-face interview with the Bears, the Raiders, and the Jaguars. He was talked about going to the Raiders. Like, oh man, these rumors are heating up. He's going to the Raiders. Tom Brady talked to him.
Most of those rumors are bullshit.
And that's 100% right. And then also it's like the Jaguars, Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, was like answered a question about like if new coach comes in and talks about, hey, what's the deal with the GM? Can we get another GM? Khan, the guy next to the GM Balky or whatever the fuck his name is, Khan said, yeah, if it makes the team better, for the most part. I'm obviously rewording his words.
Right.
But for the most part, with his GM next to him. So he was willing to listen to a head coach of a certain stature, right? But Ben Johnson said, no, I want the Chicago Bears job. During the welcoming into Hallis Hall, he said, this is where we wanted to be in terms of Chicago, in terms of Hallis Hall, in terms of being a Bear. This is what we wanted to be. It was the right decision on both ends, and the Bears finally made the right decision because one, he was the best guy out there, and two, there was mutual interest in this job. It just seemed like he was waiting for Eberflus to eventually get fired, which he did.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like if it's me, I'm taking the Bears job. I mean, think about it. When you're a head coach, you're getting your first opportunity to be a head coach. Like where you go is a key indicator of whether you're going to be successful or not. I mean, going to a team that has the fifth most cap money available, a rookie quarterback, a very promising rookie quarterback that is still under rookie contract. You got DJ Moore, who's already under contract. You got a rookie wide receiver in Rome Odunze, who's 3 years under contract. You got 3 more years. You got Keenan Allen, who is a veteran. I think he's got 1 more year on his deal, right?
No, I think this was the final year of his deal. So he's deciding whether to go back to LA or stay in Chicago.
Yeah, I would expect Ben Johnson to, I don't know, because they brought in Tim Patrick. So, I mean, but was that his decision or was that, hard to tell? Mm-hmm. But you got the roster to win now. You got the money to be successful. And more importantly, you're in a major market city, Chicago, LA, Miami, New York. Like these are the big market cities where the NFL wants you to be good. They really do, because it's better for the game if the major cities have successful teams in them.
Yep.
The Bears have been, look at their schedule last year. They didn't have a difficult game until week 8. Like the NFL tried their damnedest to make the Bears, the easier games were definitely in the beginning. They didn't even play an NFC North team till week 9 or something.
Week
So
10, yeah.
Week 10. So, I mean, the NFL wants this, but that's not even the point. The point is, like, what other team is in a situation that is this good? You could argue the Patriots have $120 million cap available.
Yeah.
But their roster is nowhere close to where Chicago's is. Even if you like Drake May a lot. And also, like, Boston is Boston and Chicago. Like, they're not I mean, you get what I'm saying. Like, it's not the same. So most people would agree that Chicago was the best job available, because how many coaches have we seen that are really young, promising, and then they end up taking the Cowboys job? Right now, the Cowboys are $285,000 in the hole. I mean,
Jesus.
And they have Dak Prescott. They have no running back. They don't have weapons, and the expectations are Super Bowl somehow. You can't be that shitty and have Super Bowl expectations unless you're the Cowboys. So, like, you're a head coach and you go there, that could derail your entire career. Or you take a job with the Saints or who are 52 mil in the hole. And next thing you know, you're not even getting a second chance. This league is very, very rare that you get 2 opportunities to be a head coach. I mean, it's like a one and done league. And depending on how bad you are, you might even have to go down a league to college football. So, like, it's it's really important as a head coach to decide, like, am I going to a place where I have an actual opportunity to succeed, or is it already rigged? Because you can be a great coach, but it's like, there's only so much you can do. And if you're like a coach that's like just happy to get a head coaching opportunity, those are the ones that go to, these terrible situations. They're just like, I just can't believe I was considered. I didn't think I was there yet. But like Ben Johnson, when you're the top of the crop, you get to pick. And I'm sure he knew right away that the Bears were his number 1 pick. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist.
And that was one of the reasons why I thought all the smoke about the Raiders is heating up. Ben Johnson's going to the Raiders. In my eyes, I was like, they need everything except edge rusher, because Max Crosby is the guy there. Like, they need everything. They need a quarterback. They need an offensive line. They need running backs. Maybe somebody outside of their number 1 wide receiver in Las Vegas. I forget his name, but like
Jacoby Myers.
They need somebody around Jacoby Myers. Like, Jacoby Myers is the offense, it seems like. And we got Rod saying, I'll join you all on the couch.
Let's go.
But Jacoby Myers is that offense in Vegas. So the only other realistic option in my mind when I was looking at all these decisions or all of these teams for a head coaching vacancy, it was like, it's got to be between the Bears and the Jags. The Jags have Trevor Lawrence under contract. They have a pretty damn good roster offensively, right? Defensively, they're kind of there too. That defense is not anything to just kind of laugh at or whatever. They were doing pretty damn good all season. They're mid to top tier, or at least getting there. So in my mind, I was like, it's the Jags or it's the Bears. And the fact that he went to the Bears a day and a half after being eliminated, I was like, it was always the Bears. Obviously, in hindsight now, you can say that, but props to his agent, props to people saying the Raiders are up top, they're heating up here, the Jags are more this, the roster's more this.
It's not like the Bears draft, though. Like, you don't have to throw a smoke screen. You know what I mean? Like, he can go wherever he wants. You don't have to, like, bluff,
Yeah, and that's true, because in my mind, I'm like, the Bears are an offensive and defensive line, and really 2 to 3 pieces on each side of that ball away from actually being a top team. Like, again, we've talked about it before several times here on this podcast. You got to have the trenches correctly. You got to have the foundation set to have all these other fucking, shiny toys to work. And that's what I think Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles are going to get to work, starting tomorrow. His press conference is tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So there's going to be a lot of things that he's going to obviously say in the press conference that are going to probably answer some questions that Bears fans have and everything. But yeah, this is for him and Ryan Poles to kind of finally come to an agreement on, because Ryan Poles, for as many good moves as he's made, it's just the off like the trenches are just not there for him yet. Javon Dexter Sr. is probably the best defensive draft draft that he's had, draftee I should say, that he's had, and he's still getting there. Like, he made a step this year, but he's still getting there. Nobody else that he's drafted on either side of the trenches has been good. Like, so I think there's going to be a lot of collaboration there. Like, Ben Johnson's coming from a team where they have Skipper, they've got Penei Sewell, they've got not Mailata, but what's his name? It starts with an R, I think. I forget. He's coming from a team with a solid offensive line and a team and a GM who knew that in order to have a well-oiled offense, your offensive line, your foundation has to be set. So they've got to do a lot of work together from here up until the draft, and really here up until the free agency market, because there's a lot of good offensive linemen and possibly defensive linemen who are going to be free agents, and they're going to be doing a lot of work together, and hopefully finally getting this team to, you know, that next level of being a playoff team and someone who, and a team that can that can compete in the division.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is, like, if the Bears go out and they have a 8-win, or let's say it's just like a disappointing season, I think at that point you would have to evaluate the roster, because I remember we did this with like Jerry Jeudy, where like I never considered this as a fan until Sean came in, where he said there is football players and there's athletes. And sometimes you have remarkable athletes, but they're not good football players.
Yeah.
So like the most important thing that Ben Johnson will do for the Bears is who he hires as his player development coaches, right? I can't say this enough. Like this is coming from a guy who had the worst roster in the league. Nick Bonito broke out. Marvin Mims broke out. All of the young players that we had that we drafted based on their potential finally exceeded or met those expectations.
Yep.
There's so many times where players get drafted and it's like they just don't have good player development coaches and athletic coaches, and what he's going to do with the injuries. Like, we had led the NFL in injuries the 3 previous season, and we've been the fewest now for 2 years in a row because of the science. And like Ben Johnson, I'm wondering, like, you know, because Sean knew that, but he's been in the business a long time. So like that's the difference between like an old coach that's been doing it for a long time and a young coach. And there's like pros and cons to both. The cons are like sometimes they're set in their ways, their playbooks dated. Ben Johnson's going to be young and innovative, but I'm wondering like what those hires are going to look like. What are the player development staff going to be like? How much attention and focus is he going to put on the science behind keeping players healthy towards the end of the season and all of those things? Because I've never experienced a head coach that was detailed. I never even heard this stuff brought up until Sean got here. And that is going to be important for the Bears because we know that they have a lot of names. Can Ben Johnson make them great football players? That's going to be the first thing we're going to learn after year one. If the Bears don't win double-digit games, then we have maybe not good football players, but we have really like high potential athletes that just needed to develop and they don't have the tools or what have you. So, I mean, these next couple days are maybe more important than hiring Ben Johnson, to be totally honest. Like,
100%.
Who he's going to have around him. And because you're a young team, right? I mean, overall,
for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part.
A lot of key positions, yeah.
I can't think of like who would be who your veterans. Who's your longest tenure Bear right now?
Jalen Johnson.
I was gonna say Jalen Johnson. He's been there
Yeah.
what, 6 years?
Right around there. Yeah. And kind of speaking on the coaches that he brings in to evaluate these guys, and this is the last thing I'll say on this. One of the names floating around, Dennis Allen. Saints head coach for the last 3-ish years.
Boo! I'm just kidding.
Bomb defensive coordinator.
He's gonna get Rex Ryan.
God, fuck no. Frank, Hank Fraley, who is the offensive line coach from Detroit. That one has already been said that's already like a foregone conclusion that he's coming along with Ben Johnson. So that right there is huge. Yeah. And, we talk about how the offensive line for the Bears is something that they need to address 100 times over this draft and free agency. Bringing in that guy is going to be great. The only guy that the Bears should keep from that offensive line is Darnell Wright, starter wise, who aren't already like, veterans and on 1-year deals or whatever. Darnell Wright is the only guy they should keep. That is the only one who did anything this year in terms of productivity for the offensive line. So in terms of development, I feel like he's bringing in, or at least the names being circulated are guys that are going to come in and be able to do that in terms of developing players.
Before you say like, oh, we're just going to keep the one good one, we drafted Garrett Bowles, and he was so bad that we didn't even give him the franchise tag. So basically, we're like, when this year's over, you're out of here, dude. Led the NFL in holding penalties every year, just not good. And then his 4th year, something switched, and he's one of the best left tackles in the game. So like, I know that as a fan, like, you're just like, get these losers off my team. They suck. But like, Ben Johnson's going to have to go through this process organically. He's not going to just be like, all these guys because he might see something in these guys, like, hey, I actually think that this guy, if he worked on his footwork and, was a little more fluid in the hips, maybe he could become something. So you're going to have a fresh pair of eyes. And that's why this dynamic's interesting, because if Poles drafted somebody 2 years ago and he's like, no, we can get this guy to work. I scouted him myself. And Ben Johnson's like, no, I don't like him. Who wins that battle? Right?
Exactly.
That's really going to be, we'll never really know, but I will say, like, they say George Payton and Sean Payton draft together, but it's like Sean drafts and George brings like a lot of great perspective, and Sean listens, and sometimes he takes the advice. But at the end of the day, like, you can tell he's calling the final shots, but it's not something that's noticeable in the public eye. Like, really? Yeah,
you don't really ever hear about like, like, I feel like the feeling around the NFL is like, in terms of Sean Payton and George Payton, it's like, yeah, he's definitely the GM. He's definitely makes decisions, but at the end of the day, it's Sean Payton, and that really, like, I want that to be something that isn't necessarily like, look, because Poles has made great moves. He's made bad moves, and he's stuck with some of his bad moves. I think as long as Kevin Warren and George McCaskey and that part are away, I feel like him, Ian Cunningham, the assistant GM, and Ben Johnson and all of his other offensive coordinators guys, defense coordinator guys, they can have an honest conversation without all these other guys looming over and being like, well, actually,
is that an issue?
It's been an issue, dude. It has been an issue. It's always like, no GM, in my opinion, for the Bears has ever had full autonomy, or a GM and a coach have never had that full autonomy together. It's like, why are we letting the CEO, president, or the owner, who has said himself, like, I am a football fan, but I'm not a football guy. He has said that. Why are those guys the ones who have the final say on a lot of things, where it's supposed to be the GM who is a former NFL player, who is a former front office exec for the Chiefs when they had gotten Patrick Mahomes and were starting that dynasty, and Ben Johnson or your head coach. Why aren't those the guys making the football moves? That's what I want.
Why is the owner of Microsoft drafting our players? Like,
yeah. Why is this fucking 80-something-year-old dude who was a self-proclaimed not football guy making football decisions? So
he's
again,
like, I don't
think
know, I fuck around.
just because I'm a billionaire. That's why I think that Zoom call with Ben Johnson was super important in terms of like, how are we going to make decisions? What is the hierarchy? Who do we have to go through? Oh, okay, I have this much power. He has this much power. These are the conversations we're having, and the buck stops here instead of going another level to the executive part. Okay, cool. Now I know that once I step into this position, there's going to be set and clear, expectations. So, again, that's kind of what I want. I want something like that where the football guys who are the ones evaluating talent and not necessarily counting the dollars that are going to the contract, making the decisions on who's the best left guard, who's the best defensive tackle, who's the best free safety to put next to Jaquan Brisker, who's the better running back. Is it Roshan Johnson next to DeAndre Swift, or is it DeAndre Swift and we're going to get fucking, I don't know, Ashton Genty from the draft? You know what I mean? Like, these are the things that I want to be clear and communicated between Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson and his staff. Like, I don't want anything going above their heads or being stricken down by these guys who don't know football. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and any team that's successful has a good owner, a good head coach, a good GM, head coach, and quarterback. That dynamic is what is so important. And that's what Sean said when he chose Denver. He said, I need an owner, a good GM. That's what I need. And what he means by that is no Jerry Jones, none of that shit you're talking about with the Bears. Because if you got to micromanage your guys, then you didn't hire the right guys.
Exactly.
And if you hire the right guys, you gotta back off. I mean, you can't like be stepping on toes. I mean, every organization that is a joke has done that. And then the ones that finally backed off, like, was it the Panthers, who owner Tepper? He said like he was taking a step back under the new head coach. And look, they had a lot more success this season than they did last year. Bryce Young looks like the guy. So, like, that's just the way it needs to be in the NFL. And it's so surprising to me that you say that Detroit is going to bring the quarterback's coach to be the OC, because usually when Ben Johnson would leave, the quarterback coach would become the OC for the Lions.
No, he's bringing the offensive line coach.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So that might still be the case for the Lions, but it's a great segue because the Lions and this deal with Ben Johnson only happened so quick because the Lions were upset by the Washington Commanders.
Yep.
This was not chronologically the first game, but it was the most surprising. So I wanted to start with this one.
Yeah.
There was a feeling around this game. Couldn't put my finger on it, but I just felt like with all of the expectations for Detroit, the Commanders playing with house money and how good Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels looked the week prior, that they could come in, mess around, play a close game. Ultimately went with the Lions because it was the safe pick. I mean, I cannot believe the fashion and the way which they beat the Lions.
It's impressive.
It was shocking. I mean, they scored 45 points on the Lions, who even after they lost Hutchinson, they still were playing really good defense throughout the year. But there was a couple games in there, like with Buffalo, and where you see them giving up a high number of points. But it felt like they were able to re-cage the following week. It wasn't like a trend where it was like, dang, they're just giving up 40 burgers every week. I was expecting the Lions to be able to contain the Commanders better than they did, but there was also like, what was it, 11 injuries or something in the game?
There was a ton. I mean, they lost one of their cornerbacks, I believe, or safeties that had. Oh man, who did he shut down? He had shut down one of the receivers against the Bucks, or I forget what game they played that he kind of shut him down. But they lost like two other guys in that game, and even Jared Goff went down for a few plays after he got lit the fuck up.
Yeah,
on that pick six.
it was a really tough blow for the Lions because, as Campbell said last year, he said it's going to be harder to get here next year.
Yeah.
And when he was saying that, he was probably thinking of Jordan Love with the Packers or maybe the Eagles, or I doubt he was thinking the Washington Commanders, are going to be the team that's going to prevent us from getting to this game.
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, man, he's been amazing. I see Rod had a comment here. Do you wish you picked up Jaden Daniels? Look, I always liked Jaden Daniels, and I always thought he was going to be the best, but I'm sticking with my guy, Bo Nix, and Rick's sticking with Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
I've been saying it all year. This will go down as the greatest quarterback class in NFL history. I really believe that every single quarterback that was taken in the first round, all 6 quarterbacks, are going to be long-term franchise quarterbacks for their teams. I really do believe that. But
I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these guys had playoff matchups too.
Oh, they will
in the future.
next year for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Patriots are going to be a couple years away. The Commanders are here now. The Broncos made the playoffs this year as well. It was actually the first time in a while that 2 rookie quarterbacks made it to the playoffs. We're reloading, but we're coming back. Then you got the Atlanta Falcons, who arguably would have been better if they started Penix from the beginning. Who knows? But we do know Penix looked like he belonged in the NFL when he took the field.
He looked good.
He looked good. He looked good. So in Drake May, I know I said the Patriots are a couple years away. That may not be true. Like, they have $120 million, and Drake May, he got some very, very important reps. We'll talk about that stuff later, but I wouldn't be shocked if all of these quarterbacks turn all of these teams into contenders next season, especially with what we just talked about with Ben Johnson working with Caleb Williams. But no quarterback has ever been able to make it to the Super Bowl, no rookie quarterback. And now here are the Commanders, 1 game away from being able to say, hey, we took a rookie quarterback to the Super Bowl, which is just very, very shocking to say the least. Now, with Detroit, like Rod said earlier, I think it was that the Lions are gonna pull back. Detroit will take a step back. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say right now. It really is, because, of course, like losing Ben Johnson, if he is, I mean, one of the best and a little bit unreplaceable, but it really depends who comes up into that position and how much he learned underneath Ben Johnson. If it's the quarterback's coach, he might be ready. He might be like, I know the plays. I know just like Ben Johnson's ready for a head coaching job. The Lions might have somebody that's ready to be an OC. And this is what we see with successful franchises every single year. We see it with the Rams, right? The Sean McVay calls the plays. OC gets a ton of credit. OC gets a job being a head coach. Quarterback's coach moves up to OC. That OC does good, and now he's the next candidate. And it goes on and on and on. Pretty soon, the entire NFL will be the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. Besides Sean Payton, who is Bill Parcells. Yeah. I mean, it is really, really cool to see, because that's a sign of a successful franchise, is that there are players that are growing to the point where they're leaving, and then the next phase of people are growing. I mean, that is just a really good sign. So this is our first opportunity to see with the Lions if that is the case for them. are they one of the franchises? Because remember, the GM for the Lions, he was with the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
So he brings over all of that, what the way the Rams did business, and that's how they're doing business. So the Lions kind of feel like a version of that, but can they sustain long-term success? This is the year we're going to find out. But bringing it back to this game, I feel like the Lions are totally devastated, and it's really hard to pick up the pieces when it ends this abruptly. And I was saying it when my team lost. I said the finality of losing a playoff game, it really hurts. I mean, as much as people say, I just want to get in a playoff game, it sucks, man. Like, a playoff game is terrible, terrible feeling. And that's coming from someone that had house money. The Lions were expected to be in the Super Bowl. So I can't even imagine what the fan base and the players are going through. And then 2 days later, their prolific OC is with their rival. This is just a really bad week for Detroit altogether. But what did you make of this game? Are you as surprised as I was about this one?
100%. I can't overstate how surprised I was. We also got to think about too, Aaron Glenn is also probably leaving Detroit to take a head coaching job right now. It looks like the Jets are the favorite. We
also of course, the Jets love their defense.
They love their defensive guys. And we also got to take into account too, right? And one of the reasons I think Rod said that Detroit's taking a step back, and I'll just touch on this really quick, is just like Ben Johnson is bringing the offensive line coach from the Lions, Aaron Glenn is going to be bringing in some guys from that staff too. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts in Detroit. There's going to be a lot of contracts that are going to be up, that are going to need to be renewed, because Detroit, for the most part, these last couple seasons, in a sense, have been playing with house money in that we got our guys. They're tight knit, right? So I think that's also another reason why Rod was saying like Detroit is going to take a step back. And really, you lose your defense and offensive coordinator, the next year is going to be difficult no matter what team you are. Now, in terms of this game, like I said, I was extremely surprised as to how this one ended. What was even more surprising was the in-game decisions made by none other than Ben Johnson on the Detroit Lions side. A lot of people were wondering what the hell he was doing, why Jahmyr Gibbs, who was averaging almost 10 yards, if not more than 10 yards per run, was not looked at more in the second half, or was not given the ball more a lot in the second half. It seemed like there was, I don't know, they wanted to rely more on Jared Goff. Jared Goff had probably one of his worst games at a terrible time. And look, as a Bears fan, I love this. I love that the Lions aren't going to the Super Bowl. I just in my head, I'm like, they're clearly the better team, top to bottom. But then they met Jaden Daniels and a Commanders team who, similar to the Broncos this year, they're playing with house money, baby. They've got weapons on both sides of the ball, but nobody expected them to get to the NFC Championship and getting there by beating the Lions. Nobody had that on their bingo card for the NFL 2024 season, especially the postseason. So it was shocking to see like that defense on Detroit look so bad and not be able to contain a lot of that Washington offense. Because we've got to look at the Washington team as a whole last year. The biggest acquisition over the offseason, Dan Quinn, former Super Bowl head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, former Arizona head coach and offensive coordinator with the Commanders, who leads a damn good offense, regardless of if it's the first half of the season, the second half of the season, not so good. They're in the NFC Championship. And of course, Jaden Daniels, who he himself transcends that team to the next level in which they're at now. They have 12 wins in the season. All of those things combined make for a magical season, but they also mean that this is the first year with Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, and Jaden Daniels. This is the second year of the new ownership group. And yet here you are in the NFC Championship game. playing with house money, beating one of the best teams in the NFL to get here. Like it was surprising. Jane Daniels was making great plays, unflappable. This guy, it could be a 4th and 2, and it doesn't matter to him. He's just confident.
About that.
Yeah, and he's confident in his abilities to be able to convert these. He's like, yeah, I'll just get it to Terry McLaurin. Yeah, I'll do it myself. Yeah, I'll run between the tackles. Like, this guy seems like everything is so nonchalant to him. And it's really impressive what Jaden Daniels has been able to do. It's impressive what a lot of the players on this Washington offense were able to do, because you had De'Ami Brown, a guy who had 5-6 catches this game, 5-6 catches the last game for touchdowns. Who the fuck was De'Ami Brown? Who the fuck is De'Ami Brown when you got Terry McLaurin, right? Like, this is what Jaden Daniels did for this team. Is he is starting to become those type of quarterbacks that we have talked about a lot on this podcast, where if you're the quarterback and you can make a guy like De'Ami Brown, who is basically has been a no-namer for most of his career, into one of the stars of the game in a playoff game, that's how good of a quarterback you are. You're able to distribute the ball to anyone and everyone. By the way, Zach Ertz, great security blanket for Jane Daniels. Terry McLaurin, fucking turn the goddamn the burners on, went in between the tackles there during a little wide receiver screen all the way to the touchdown. Like, you've got talent up and down this team. We had talked about how their passing defense was one of the top, but their overall defense wasn't really that great. And yet they still, even though the Lions scored 31, they outscored the Lions because of that offense, because of Jaden Daniels. But yeah, man, it was surprising as a whole. But when you look at the way they did it, Jared Goff had a bad game. Can't take anything away from the defense, because they were there to make those plays. Pick 6 and other interceptions, one of them. Jahmyr Gibbs, they just didn't look to Jahmyr Gibbs anymore in the second half, so they were able to, in a sense, passively shut him down in that sense. And now it's just like, all right, well, let's focus on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let's focus on Laporta. Let's get to Jared Goff in terms of rushing the passer, blitzing, and they got to him. So the way they did it, and Dan Quinn, obviously a defensive head coach, so he knew what to dial up when. They did it at the end of the day, man. It's surprising. A lot of Lions fans are in disbelief and very, very sad. And I get it. I understand. Playoff losses are rough. You know, once you lose to not only your division rival, but your most hated rival in the NFC Championship to get to the Super Bowl, give me a call. It's going to be one of these guys next week between the Eagles and the Commanders. But I feel the pain. I feel the pain. So it sucks for the Lions fans, but also as a Bears fan, I love it.
Yeah, that's so messed up, though. The I get it. The only way Washington could have won this game is the way they won this game, right? Because if you just look at offense, right, the Lions had a better day offensively. But
over 500 yards of offense. Yeah, it was crazy.
You throw 2 pick sixes, you know, I mean, but I mean, the Commanders had 496 total yards as well. Yeah. So it's not like, they had 200 yards and, they did everything that they wanted to do. I mean, look how close this was. 496 to 521 for the Lions winning. Average yards per play, 6.8 for the Commanders, 7.7 for the Lions. Yeah. So about 1 yard more per play. Total first downs, 27 to 30 for the Lions. Rushing first downs, Commanders had 9, Lions with 9. Obviously, the Lions weren't running, as you said. Passing first downs, 14 to 20. Penalty first downs, the Commanders had 3, the Lions had 1. Third down efficiency, 42% to 44%. Fourth down efficiency, 57% to the Lions with 50. Possession, each had 11. Average plays per drive, 7.5 to 6.7. Average yards per drive, 41 to 43. I mean, it was like Matt's ass.
Yeah.
The only difference is all of those turnover touchdowns. And that is really what sucks, because the Lions actually had 2 more red zone possessions than the Commanders. The Lions were in the red zone 6 times. The Commanders were only in there 4 times. And they turned 3 into touchdowns. So they were only at 50%, where the Commanders were 4 for 4. So that's something that you're looking at with the Commanders, is like their day. You could easily get all those defensive touchdowns and be like, well, their defense kind of carried them. But then you look at their offense and you're like, they were right with the Lions, who had a crazy good offensive day, just didn't capitalize in the red zone. But this is something that you can look at next week and say, hey, if we can just, continue to, every time we get in the red zone, score a touchdown and not a field goal, we're giving our team a really good chance. 100% red zone scoring efficiency is pretty wild.
Yeah.
So
in a playoff game too.
In a playoff game on the road as well. So I think offensively, the Commanders feel like we can beat anybody with these numbers. The question is, can they do it to a better defense? Because next week it's going to be a much different story defensively. But Brian Branch, he excelled for the Lions, both run defense and in coverage. He earned an 84.0 grade in each category, and he finished the game with a 92.6 PFF grade. Branch was targeted 7 times in coverage, allowed 6 receptions, but altogether they were 38 yards and only 1 first down. And he forced 1 incompletion. It always sucks when a player plays that great and the rest of the team just is doing terrible, because it's like Brian Branch definitely deserved to win this game. And it absolutely sucks. But this wasn't one of those where they scored 2 defensive touchdowns and only had 172 total offensive yards. It's like the Commanders played a complete football game on both sides of the ball. Arguably, defensively, they gave up too much. 500 yards, that's not good, but you got to keep in the perspective that the Lions were playing in comeback mode, and the Commanders were playing with a 2-possession lead for most of the game. So it'll be shocking as we get into our division stuff next week. But let's talk about the team that they're going to play. All right. The Philadelphia Eagles win 28-22 over the Rams. We streamed this game. The Rams really had a chance at the end. It felt like they were going to win it. An extra point would have been it. By 1 point, they would have walked off 29-28. They moved down the field when there was a little over 2 minutes left. They score a touchdown. They kick it off. They call all 3 of their timeouts. They get the ball back. They have no timeouts, but they have over 2 minutes to work with, 2.5 minutes, and they're able to get down the field. Matthew Stafford threw I forget who it was. I think it was Demarcus Robinson. No, it was Puka Nacua. Amazing catch on the corner, 40 yards downfield. Gets them all the way down into Eagles territory, but then the drive stalls on the 20-yard line, and it's because of Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter came through. That was a key 3rd down sack. I really didn't like the decision when they stopped going hurry up. But really, it was that penalty. That penalty, there was I think it was a false start on 2nd down, and it moved them back.
Oh, yeah.
And then they took a sack. And after that sack, it was okay, now it's 4th and 18 or something like that. And it just became unrealistic. But it sucks because I felt like they could have kept going no huddle. The defensive line for the Eagles was totally exhausted. And they decided to slow it down. And I felt like it ended up costing them the game. But I thought it was a really good fight by the Rams. I expect it. Matthew Stafford's unbelievable in these situations, but ultimately, I'm going to continue to say I think the Rams would have won this game had it not been snowing the way it was. I think the snowy conditions played a huge role in this game. We'll never know, but the Rams are undoubtedly a dome team. They play their best football indoors. Puka Nacua was terrible. He had the amazing catch, but he was bad all day. Key drop, just very uncharacteristic. His footing, there was a couple times where he was trying to catch up to a ball, but he just couldn't grip the turf or the grass. It was just really, really rough for the Rams because it was like the Eagles are much more used to playing in those elements. And I know the Rams would never use that as an excuse. They're going to be like, it's football. We got to win in every condition. But there's a reality that the Rams don't play in these conditions very often, and it kind of showed. Whereas the Eagles looked fine in this weather.
Yeah, for the most part, I would say like the Eagles' touchdowns were Jalen Hurts rush and Saquon Barkley rush, right? So I don't want to say like, oh yeah, the Eagles look natural in this, because it seemed to me, and maybe the stats show it too. I'm not entirely sure, but in terms of passing, Stafford 324 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts 128 yards, 0 touchdowns, 15 of 20. So Barkley 205 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns, and Hurts 70 yards rushing with 1 touchdown. I think the rushing game just was overpowering the Rams, and Stafford, God, he put on a show where 324 yards in the snow in Philly, getting them down the field to give yourself a shot to win this game. Jalen Carter, all the props to him for sacking him on that 3rd down, and then that incomplete pass on 4th from Stafford to pretty much end the drive and end the game there. It's just impressive what Stafford has done in the latter half of his career. He's won a Super Bowl, and he's been in the playoffs multiple times with his new team on the Rams, and specifically 2 times this year and last year when it didn't seem like the Rams were a playoff type of team. So him, Sean McVay, a lot of guys on this team willed this Rams team into the playoffs. So a lot of credit to them. But at the end of the day, the rushing attack and the defense, which caused fumbles of Kyren Williams and Stafford, like, were the difference here in this game. Could the Rams have beaten them on a, regular, just a cold day, maybe no snow, no flurries, nothing like that? Maybe, but man, to really look at this game and be like, Jalen Carter and those turnovers were huge in the moments that happened. It's just what the Eagles do best. And you had said it earlier when we were talking about the Commanders and Lions. Commanders are going to be going up against a much better defense, but this Eagles team is also going to be going against a much more dynamic quarterback who can make things happen. So it's going to be a very awesome NFC Championship. But you're right in terms of the Rams. Like, Puka Nacua was not playing very well. Cooper Kupp had like a few catches. I don't really know. I'm going to look at his stats right now. Cooper Kupp had 5 receptions for 61 yards. I mean, nothing to kind of like laugh at or anything, but it didn't seem like those 61 yards or those catches were, in a majority of them at least, weren't huge moments. I can think of one that was like a huge moment for a first down to keep a drive alive. But yeah, Puka Nacua was kind of the guy there who was struggling, but also came up with huge catches, as well as DeMarcus Robinson. So through the air, I feel like the Rams were doing everything they possibly could, and especially Stafford. It was like, it just seemed like Kyren Williams, even though he eclipsed 100 yards, that turnover was huge. And you could see when he was going to the sidelines, taking off his helmet, slamming it on the ground, like that right there, as well as the Stafford fumble, led to 6 points. And they lost by 6 points. So those turnovers were that big in terms of winning or losing this game. If those don't happen, I mean, we're looking at a possibly completely different game. But again, credit to Saquon, credit to that defense on the Eagles side. They were at home. They were in the elements as well. And they, at the end of the day, they made that many more plays to be able to beat the Rams by 6.
Yeah, and the Eagles, much more dynamic quarterback in Jayden Daniels. I mean, they're gonna have to be able to contain him and make sure that he stays inside the pocket. And they've played. This will be their 3rd time playing. I mean, the game where the Commanders lost 18-26, Jayden Daniels only had 18 rushing yards in that game. I mean, it was like, They did their job. They contained him, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
only give up 18 rushing yards to a quarterback like that, you're doing a damn good job. And the Commanders only got 18 points out of that whole game. Then you go to the one where they played the 33-36 win, and it
Yeah.
was like a totally different story where Jane Daniels is running for 81 yards. He's the leading rusher in the game. So there's like two totally different stories, those games. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
see if the Eagles, it's hard to pick because you're like, well, which one's going to show up this week?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I'll just show you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the Commanders in line. So you got total points, self-explanatory. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. This is the one. So this is the Rams and Eagles. Look at how crazy this is. Average yards per play, 5.1 to 5.7,
Mm-hmm.
18-16. Look at down here. Third down efficiency, 38-40, 11%, 13,
Wow.
12, 6.5, 6.1. Average yards, 27.7, 26.9. This game was very, very close, but the Rams actually played 20 plays in the red zone and the Eagles only 5. But that's because
Wow.
the Eagles kept scoring on big plays.
Huge
The
chunk
Rams
plays. Yeah.
the Rams actually did an okay job defensively. The one thing, and this is what I'm getting at, if the one thing that the Rams didn't do well was prevent the big play from happening. If
Yep.
they could have done that, they had a real shot at winning this game because they did a good
Yep.
job of keeping them out of the red zone. And I got to say, Jared Verse, hell of a game. He's going to be good for a long time in the
Oh
league. The
yeah.
Rams, they drafted him. Also, Braden Fisk got hurt in this game and never really came back into it. That is a
Oh.
key injury. I think he got hurt early in the second quarter, and I was like, man, that is just not somebody that they can miss. There was a point where he was in the defensive rookie of the year conversation. So
Yeah.
they did lose him, and he's a run stopper. That's his thing. So it was just
Mm-hmm.
really bad timing, but everyone's got to deal with injuries. The Eagles are moving on to the next round,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll play the Washington Commanders. Now go into the
Real.
eight. Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. I want to give the viewers, anybody watching, the weirdest stat ever. Jake
Oh,
Elliott, the kicker for the Eagles, when he misses an extra point in the playoffs, the Eagles are 3-0. The Eagles are 3-0 when he misses an extra point in the playoffs. Is that not the weirdest fucking shit like you've ever heard? Like, what? So he has to miss one next week. Like he just has to keep that streak alive, I
I
think.
feel like 3 is not enough to purposely miss. Like if it was like 17,
Right?
at
Yeah.
that point you're like, let's just shank one.
The fucking
Um,
mind games he's playing.
that is weird. The man, so many good games on Sunday. I mean, it was only 2, but they were all good.
Yeah.
The Buffalo Bills, they are able to take care of business
Hmm.
against the Ravens. They end up winning by 2 points, 27-25. It was a hard-fought win. I mean, the Bills came out, got out to a really good lead. I can tell you the turning point of this game. I know exactly when it happened. It was when the score was, I believe it was 7-14, or no, it was 7-10,
Hmm.
and there was 2 minutes left in the game, and the Bills threw a deep ball on third down. It wasn't complete, and they called pass interference on the Ravens. That was a crusher because
Yeah.
the Bills would end up scoring on that drive and then receiving the ball to come out in the second half.
Hmm.
Um, and they didn't score on that one, but it was still 20. At that point, it was 7. What was halftime score? 21 to
It
7.
was 21-10 at halftime.
21-10 at halftime. And then, um, did they score in the third quarter?
Not the Bills. Are you talking about the
Not the
Ravens
Bills,
or the
right?
Bills? Yeah.
But 21-10, when you were watching this game, it felt like, oh, this is the Bills' game to win, right?
Hmm.
But I think we all felt, at least I did, like Ravens are going to come back into this game. They're not going to just
Yeah.
get blown out. That's not how this is going to go. But it was possible that we were headed in that direction. If the Bills came out and scored to start the third quarter, it was going to be 28-10. And the Ravens knew that, and they came out and they got like a 4-and-out. It was a really quick drive. They get the ball back, and they start scoring, and they get themselves back into the game. Lamar Jackson, he did struggle under pressure. 2 turnovers in the first half, which one of them didn't result in anything, but one of them went back for a pick six, right? I think it was a pick six.
I think
it was a big return. It was Von Miller. I'm thinking of Von Miller. He was running. That was the fumble that ultimately ended up leading to points. But, I mean, Lamar said after the game, because this game would come down to a 2-point conversion. The Ravens drive down the field, score a touchdown. Everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to overtime. Or you're thinking Josh Allen's got a minute and 13 seconds or something like that to work with.
Yeah.
And the perfect play. Now, this would be the second 2-point conversion the Ravens attempted. The first one, he missed Isaiah Likely on a flat route, tried to squeeze it in the middle. We talked about it. It was a bad choice. So I'm thinking, all right, they're going to do the same thing here, but they'd run it on the other side, and they did, and it was there, but Mark Andrews could not catch it. He could not catch it. It was heartbreaking, really, for Raven fans, because that's when Mark Andrews catches every time, besides right then. And that wasn't his first mistake of the game either. He also had one of the fumbles.
Yep.
So it was just a bad game for a couple players, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. I still felt like Lamar showed why he's so good, is that he was able to come back in through all of that against a team like Buffalo, and yet the 2-point conversion gets caught, and who knows what happens. So that's pretty remarkable for Lamar. I know that there's going to be people that think like, oh, this is Lamar in important playoff games, but I don't know if I'm coming away feeling that way. I feel like, if Lamar never like turned it on, I would have felt that way. But I felt like that second half was a different team. The Ravens won the second half. They just couldn't win the game because of the hole they dug themselves into in the first half. Very bad interception by Lamar. Still don't know what that was, that first one. But overall, this was a really good game. In Buffalo, I didn't talk a lot about them, but I felt like they played with the lead the entire game. And the way they played in the second half, I don't know if they should have gotten so, in my opinion, I mean, Sean McDermott ran the ball to get Baltimore to call a timeout on second down. And that was with a little over 2 minutes left. And I'm like, dude, you should be trying to score right now. Why are you making them call a timeout? Like, I didn't like that. But then the penalty happens and no one talks about it. But next week, they're going to need Sean McDermott, in my opinion, to not play like, okay, let's try to hurt the Chiefs. No, you should just try to beat the Chiefs. Don't play defensively
100%.
in these type of games. Be aggressive and go out there and score points, because what got you the win was the aggressiveness. It was the pass interference call in that touchdown. That shows you how crucial a touchdown on that drive ultimately ended up being, because it won you the game, and yet you got lucked into that, and you were trying to run the ball, not realizing how important scoring on that drive was. So I just want to see McDermott learn from this and coach a better game next week, make better situational decisions, and be more aggressive, because they're going to need it to beat Kansas City.
Be aggressive. Be aggressive. So, and I agree, because next week it's McDermott and the Bills boogeyman. It's the Kansas City Chiefs, who they have consistently lost to in the playoffs for what seems like a decade already. Obviously, it hasn't been that long, but there's been rule changes because of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. There's been showdowns where the Bills have favored, and it just has not gone their way. There's been bad luck. Obviously, there's the entire NFL sentiment that the Chiefs suck, or I'm sorry, the refs suck the Chiefs' ball and just give them all the calls. Obviously, right? So yeah, I agree, man. Sean McDermott has got to play next week like he wants to just fucking have his heel on their throats the entire game. Don't play like they're being conservative and just trying to win out the game and trying to get it to 45 seconds with the ball back and be able to kneel it. No, play with the desire to win, because that does not work in the NFL to play that way, to play conservative, unless the moment dictates a conservative type of play. But if you're if you're like this Ravens and Bills game, there's no reason to play like that. Now, the Ravens, like you had said it earlier, first half mistakes were crucial in losing this game. Lamar Jackson fumble, the interception. Honestly, as well as Mark Andrews, honestly, I don't know which one was worse. I don't know if the fumble was worse or if the interception was worse on Lamar Jackson. To me, it seemed like the fumble was that much more crucial. Like, at least interceptions, you're throwing it downfield. You're trying to get the ball into the end zone. You're trying to get a first down, something to move you forward. And while I'm not saying that interceptions are less bad than fumbles or vice versa, it just, to me, it seemed like the fumble was the one where it was like, motherfucker, this is Lamar Jackson. This is playoff Lamar, unfortunately, right? To me, that's kind of what it was. And obviously, the Mark Andrews drop for that 2-point conversion, we were discussing, like, in the NFL, just based off numbers, about 50% you're looking at for 2-point conversion. So if you try it twice, you're more than likely going to get it once. For the Ravens, they were 0 for 2. And because of that Mark Andrews drop, the first one was a little bit weird. But because of that Mark Andrews drop, man, it just made it that much worse in the snow and all that. And the Ravens PR team, before the game, they had a video up, I think on X, of Mark Andrews like running through the snow with like his one thermal shirt on, and that's it. And it's like the Mark Andrews getting ready for the snow because it's not a problem for him. And then that's how the game ends. And it's like, you motherfuckers. Anyway, those mistakes are crucial in the first half. But you're right. Second half was all Ravens. Buffalo didn't score in the third. They had the 6 points in the fourth that got them the win really at the end of the day. But that right there, just that first half of all those mistakes on the Ravens side, it was like, why? Why did this happen to us? Why did I have to fumble? Why did we have to throw those interceptions? Because for the most part, they were having a very good day. They were having, I mean, it's 25-27 at the end of the day, and it was because of a failed 2-point conversion. That's how I feel like a lot of people expected this game to go. 27-24, 30-27, 31-28, something along those lines. And I think when we were making our predictions, I was like, this is a 2 to 3 point game. I think that's what I had said, like 2 or 3 points. It was that close, and that's how it kind of went down. Now, Josh Allen, too, didn't really throw the ball for that many yards. I have it up here. Let me look at the stats real quick. He threw for 127 yards. Ray Davis rushed for the touchdown, and I think Josh Allen had the 2 other touchdowns. So it was another day where it was like on the ground, Josh Allen kind of doing it himself. It wasn't doing it through the air. And then you look at Lamar Jackson, 2 touchdowns thrown, 254 yards. It was such a balanced attack, although it was on different types of offense, that this game just kind of basically gave us what we expected. The Bills defense was really good at getting those turnovers. Von Miller, we had talked about him. The interceptions, Rasul Douglas, I think, came up with one of the fumbles from Mark Andrews. I think that was him who came up with it. Defensively, they played a really good first half. And then second half, obviously, they couldn't let them come back. That's credit to the Ravens, though, too, for understanding where they were in the game and kind of the hurriedness that they had to play that second half in. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it was the Bills. It was the home team who came out with the win, man. And they, while the second half again wasn't great for the Bills, they held. They held. This was honestly a tale of two halves. It was the Bills dominating in that first, and that second one being that close to where they almost went into overtime. Again, credit to Josh Allen and Sean McDermott, but next week against the Chiefs, who we're going to talk about here in a bit, it's got to be one of those games where you go all the fuck out and don't let up the gas.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because we'll see with Kansas City. Like, let's talk about it. So they win 23-14 over the Texans, and kind of a weird game. It's like, how do you slow down Mahomes, who lit it up again, 177 passing yards? I mean, this guy is unstoppable. It's like, God, what? 177.
Yeah.
You know what and think about Fairbairn, who missed a 55-yard field goal. He
Yep.
missed an extra point. That's 4 points right there. And then with just under 2 minutes to go in the game, they were like, well, we're going to need the field goal anyway. Let's kick it now. And then it gets blocked.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, right there. I
Special
mean,
teams, baby.
if you just add the 3 points from the missed field goal and the extra point, they're only down 6. So they maybe don't even need to kick a field goal there because it's not a 2-possession game. So it just like really sucks that their kicker didn't come through. I always hate that when teams lose. Like I think the Ravens lost to the Steelers because Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals earlier this season. It's just like, man, you got one job to make these field goals, and you just suck. But you gotta look at the Chiefs and say, okay, how are they winning with this formula? 177 yards. It's the pressure. CJ Stroud sacked 8 times. 8 times.
Huge.
He threw for 245 yards, but 19 of his 41 dropbacks, he was pressured. So it was a really, really solid defensive performance from the Chiefs, and that's why they won this game. They won the game because of their defense. And I think there was even a moment in this game where Travis Kelce was upset and angry, but then he ends up getting a touchdown a little bit later. I'm not ready to say like Mahomes and Kelce, like they're in their playoff form. There's just that one play that was a touchdown that was a really like crazy throw where he was like falling and then threw it, and he's just standing there like like there was that play, and that was cool enough for everyone to kind of lay off the where is Kelce conversation. But I'm not going to just throw that conversation away because of one play. I'm wondering, like, okay, well, is that going to come next week? Kelce was the highest graded player on the field, 86.4 PFF grade. Nico Collins was up there too, but Travis Kelce, he made the plays when it mattered the most, and that's what we're so used to seeing with Kansas City. I mean, this was his best single game grade since week 14 of last year. So this was his best game of the season. He had 8 targets, 117 yards, a touchdown, 4 first downs. I'm just like, still, I don't know. I don't know if like Kelce is, because remember, Mahomes didn't even throw for 200 yards.
No.
So is the recipe to give 80% of your passing yards to your tight end and go under 200? Or was that just the only thing available this week? And next week we're going to see more DeAndre Hopkins and more Xavier Worthy. What is this going to look like? Now I had to work during this game, so I didn't see it. Now that I'm looking at the box score, it looks like Kelce and Mahomes did have that connection throughout the game. But I turned it on my phone for a second, and I heard the announcer saying that Kelsey was upset, like visibly upset on the field. So like I didn't know what that was, what was going on, but I assumed it was because he wasn't getting the targets he wants. But this has got to be the only way the Chiefs can go to the Super Bowl, in my opinion, is feeding Kelsey at least 8 targets and then getting the other guys involved too, because I don't know if you're holding Josh Allen and the Bills to, 14 points. I just don't think that's possible.
Yeah.
Now, can you hold them to 22? Probably not. Or 23? Probably not. So I'm wondering right now, like, if the Chiefs do win, it's got to be psychologically that they just have something over the Bills. Because this game, although you were much higher on the Texans than I was going into the game, I felt like the Chargers played like a horrific game the week before, and the Texans were coming in with pretty good vibes, but I just didn't take them serious at all, like this year, which I thought they were going to be the Super Bowl favorite going into the year. In about week 4, week 5, I was like, Texans aren't. It's not happening. They just weren't clicking the way they were offensively this year, last year, and I felt like the Chiefs only having to beat the Texans to get to the conference championship is wild. But that's what they earned by being the number 1 seed. But the Texans, I don't know if you can say the Chiefs are battle tested because of this win going into Buffalo. In the fact that Mahomes had 177 passing yards against them. I don't know how you're feeling. I think if you're a Chiefs fan, you're just like, we're going to win because we're the Chiefs. But outside of that, I don't know if this was the kind of win that just like, I guess it depends how you feel about the Texans, to be honest. Because Mahomes said after the game, he said, that was a good defense we played. No, our offense wasn't struggling. That's just a really good defense. And I'm like, I mean, all right. But
the Texans defense is good, man. That Texans defense is really, really good.
Yeah,
look what they did to the Chargers.
They're not really, really good.
Oh, they're really, really good.
The Eagles, Chargers, Chiefs, Broncos, Vikings, Packers, Steelers, Bills, Ravens, Dolphins, all
Steelers not as good. Packers not as good. Nope.
They
no
give
way.
up less points per game.
And the Texans beat the Chargers, so that's already one team off. But they're not as good. Like roster, name by name and position by position. Cool. They gave up less points. What were the Steelers doing the last 7 weeks of the season? What was that defense doing? Losing games.
Dog
you know
shit.
what I mean? Yeah, they were dog shit. But the Texans defense is a good defense.
We don't pull like 3 games here and like we look at the overall. I can't be like Denver would be number 1 if you take out the Buffalo and the Ravens game. I mean, it's an overall sample size. Houston wasn't a top 10 defense this year, statistically. But even if you want to crack them at 10 or 9, you can't put them in your top 5. So I just like this idea that like Houston is so good that's why the Chiefs didn't get 200 passing yards when the Chiefs have been doing that all season. Like Mahomes has been throwing for under 200 passing yards all the time. So now it's about this like unstoppable defense, dude. It's like if this was like the first game where Mahomes looked like that, I would be like, okay, maybe there's something to it. But the fact is the Chiefs offense, what we saw on Sunday is what we've been watching all year long.
Well, that's kind of what I mean. Like I feel like that's been Mahomes in this offense, right? All year. Like, let's see, 2024, like 320, 260, 159. Like there's a lot of 100-yard games kind of sprinkled in there and just over 200-yard games for Patrick Mahomes in this season. So it is kind of what we've seen all year, but also like that Texans defense showed the fuck out in the playoffs, man. They had 4 interceptions on Herbert last week. Obviously a couple of those not really on the defense, mostly on the players. But 4 interceptions is 4 interceptions. They beat one of the best defenses in the Chargers, and then they hold Patrick Mahomes to less than 200 yards. Yeah, Travis Kelce at the end of the day had over 100 yards in that touchdown, but rushing too, like the Chiefs didn't have over 100 yards rushing at all. They had a total of 50 yards rushing.
Yeah.
Like I think that's taking into account like all the negative yards and what they really got net wise. But I still think this Texans defense is on the up and up. I mean, you got Daniil Hunter, you got
they're on the up and up for sure.
Anderson Jr., Stingley there on the outside. There's a lot of guys on this defense, but the Chiefs, man, when you were talking about the amount of times they sacked Stroud 8 times, Karlaftis was all over the place. Chris Jones was all over the place. This Chiefs defense is elite as well. I think they're probably a top 2, top 3 defense. And the Texans, sure, points per game, I guess, if we're taking that one, if they're not a top 10, then they're not a top 10 in terms of points per game. But what they've done in the playoffs is extremely important. They only let up a total of 212 offensive yards. It's just the Texans offense couldn't take advantage of a lot of those, take advantage of out yarding or out offensing the Chiefs. I had said in this game, like there was a third quarter drive where the Texans took 10.5 minutes off the clock and scored a touchdown. Awesome. Where the fuck was that in the first and second quarter? They completely abandoned the run, it seemed like, after that 10.5 minute drive. And yes, it was because they're down, so they're going to pass the ball a lot more. But also, it's like, why didn't we do that in the first half? I feel like that, along with the sacks of Stroud, who he took a lot. He's a fucking gamer. That was the downfall of the Texans, unfortunately, was the sacks and just the lack of like running the ball with Mixon after that third quarter touchdown. It was like, it was over. And even in the first quarter, like he was averaging quite a good amount of yards. But CJ Stroud like when they wanted to pass, could not stay on his feet, was always, rolling right, rolling left, trying to get out of pressure and trying to basically extend the play. But the Chiefs defense is like fucking, you got to clap it up for them, because while you had Kareem Hunt for a touchdown and you had Travis Kelce for a touchdown, it was that and along with certain calls that were going in the Chiefs' favor, that the NFL world and even the commentators, the broadcasters were like, I don't know about that one. So I felt like the Texans defense did its job, but the Chiefs defense did an even better job in terms of getting to CJ Stroud and really preventing them from creating big plays too. It's just like sack. Okay, now it's 2nd and 17. All right, well, we're going to run it and get 5 yards. Now you're looking at a 3rd and 12, and it's like, well, now you're going to get sacked again, or you're going to get put under pressure by the Chiefs defense. So I feel like those are the biggest factors. Both defenses played well. The Chiefs played better, and some calls went the Chiefs' way, as they usually do. To a lot of pissed off NFL fans, they're like, "Fuck this shit. This always happens." But at the end of the day, the Chiefs are going to the AFC Championship. They were the better team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And the Texans, I think, again, are a team with the head coach, the rookie quarterback. I don't know if their GM is new as well, but maybe not. But those two guys, to make it to the playoffs 2 years in a row and to be 2-2 is awesome, because this is nothing but a great stepping stone to what you have ahead of the future. And that's like, well, now we're the Texans. We've got to consistently make the playoffs. We've got to consistently win these divisions to get at least a home playoff game, or just make it to the playoffs. And that's what they've done in the first 2 years under this quarterback and head coach. And, they need a couple more additions on the offensive line for sure. But this game, again, their defense played really well. The other defense just played that much better.
NFL broke its silence on the questionable calls, to say the least, about the, yeah. And Will Anderson said, "We knew it was going to be us versus the refs going into this game."
Yeah.
After he was flagged for roughing the passer. Referee Clay Martin told reporters, "I had foreseeable contact to the face mask area, and so I went with roughing the passer on that play." NFL senior VP officiating made it clear that the officials made the right call, even though nobody likes it.
Mm-hmm.
When defenders come in and they end up coming in face to face, if there's contact to the head of the quarterback, it's probably going to be called by the officials. Now it has to be forcible. And one of the things we added this year is that there's no contact at all to the helmet. Replay can assist. But on this play, there was contact. If there's no contact at all to the helmet, replay can assist. But on this play, there was contact. So I don't understand that at all. It sounds like kind of weird because if there's no contact at all to the helmet, replay can assist. But wouldn't we want to use replay assist for when there is contact to the helmet or when you believe there is? Because if there isn't, then what do you need to use replay assist for?
Good question.
I mean, the only thing about it's not necessarily that they're like getting a bunch of penalties. It's just like the penalties, the timing of them they seem like these crucial moments in the game. And you got to credit Kansas City because not only do they get the penalties, but they always capitalize them. It reminds me of Aaron Rodgers when there's a false start or offsides and he throws the bomb downfield. Like as soon as it's third down and it's a turnover or it's going to be a punt, and then that penalty comes out, it's like, the Chiefs are scoring on that drive. I don't care if they're on the 10, 50, like they're bringing it home. And that's what they did. I mean, the calls that were made, even the ones that the one where Mahomes was down here and the two Texans hit each other, like those turned into touchdowns. And those, obviously the score, you can see there wasn't many of those. So the continued drives, I think that's what fans are so mad about. But I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be good enough to beat the team, even if they do get a couple calls. If you feel like, oh, there's a bias against this team, then you should be even more prepared. And the NFL, I don't feel like they're trying to do this. I just feel like once everyone's talking about it, we notice it more, right? It's like on the front of everyone's mind. So like if Bryce Young gets a questionable call, it's like no one cares. But if Mahomes gets it, it's like
it's a fucking magnifying glass on him.
It's a giant magnifying glass on him, and that happens all the time in media. It doesn't matter what it is. Like sometimes it's just the power of the media. It's the power of the magnifying glass.
Yeah.
Creating the illusion that certain players are benefiting more than other players. And I don't, as much as I hate those calls, like I don't know if the NFL is like together on this and they're like, okay, we need Mahomes. I don't think that it matters. Like I think if Buffalo goes to the Super Bowl, that will be good too. I mean, it's not like the ratings are going to plummet if Josh Allen.
I was going to ask that question. Like which scenario for this AFC Championship coming up is better for the NFL? A team that probably half the NFL, if not more, hates getting a three-peat Super Bowl, right? Or is it Buffalo, who generally I would say NFL fans tend to lean more that they like beating the giant, of the Chiefs and moving to the Super Bowl? Who cares if they win it or not? It's them moving on to the Super Bowl. Like, I feel like either way, both of these situations, both of these outcomes is going to be great for the game regardless. Like, obviously you are a fan of the Broncos who's in the division with the Chiefs. I'm sure you're not going to love it as much as a random Panthers fan who's like, yeah, fuck it, why not? It'd be cool to see the Chiefs do a three-peat. You know what I mean? Like, I can understand that because for me, as long as everybody in the NFC North has a terrible season, I'm happy. Like the Lions losing, the Vikings losing, and the Packers losing in 2025. Love it. Mwah. Chef's kiss. Cannot love anything more. But for another fan who is outside of the NFC North, yeah, sure. For example, I like the Patriots dynasty. I love Tom Brady. I love the success. I love that every season it was like, if they're not in the playoffs, it's a little weird. But I can understand for those people who are Chiefs haters, Mahomes haters, Kelsey haters, Taylor Swift haters. I don't want to see the fucking Chiefs in the Super Bowl again.
The only thing I don't like, okay, because it's like the penalties. If you're like Mahomes and you're getting these bullshit penalties, like it, but there's nothing you can do about it. So it's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting him to be like, what are you talking about? That wasn't roughing the passer. I'm not expecting that. But when you see him later in the game, like turning into a runner and then about to run out of bounds, but then stop a yard short just so he can get pushed out just to then flop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the game within the game that he's playing. If you're really that great, why do you need these? I mean, I don't want to call it cheating, but let's be real. Let's talk about it. You are trying to create the illusion that another player is doing something that he's not actually doing to you in order to extend a drive. I don't know what you call that, but to me, it is. If it's not cheating, it's a very close relative of it.
It's what's referred to as, and I'm sure you've heard this. It's gamesmanship. That's what it is. Like and I agree. I don't really enjoy it because it does take a little bit away from the game. What I did love about that is that in that situation in which he was running towards the left sideline, but stayed in, and then when he got pushed out, he did the flop. There was a ref right there, and he didn't call it. He did not call it. I fucking love that because just like when I watch the World Cup every 4 years, and you got these fucking Nancy's fucking flopping on every tackle, and then they get called, and it's a yellow card, and it's a free kick, whatever it is. It's like, this is why I didn't respect soccer, because it's fun. It's great to have all these countries come together for one big tournament. It's an awesome concept. But the little bitches who make it into it about themselves and flopping every 3 seconds is like, God, you're such a bitch. You know what I mean? Like, you're flopping. And so while I get what Patrick Mahomes is doing, because there's a lot of, it's really only the quarterback that can flop in this sense. And he showed how they could do it. It's not as prevalent in football in the NFL as it is in soccer. But I loved that the fucking ref was right there when it happened and didn't throw a flag. That was a sense of satisfaction.
And I feel like as a Chiefs fan, like, you're going to defend your team, but I feel like I feel like anybody's got to draw a line there and be like, that's undefendable. And
100%.
And it only hurts himself because it's like, dude, think about it. You're trying to do something no quarterback has ever done. You're trying to be standing alone on the mountain of a three-peat. And yet you're acting like that out there. Like, dude, this is how you're going to be remembered in these next couple games. If you do pull this off, you don't want that to be part of the highlight tape that people are watching 30 years from now.
Yeah.
Like, it just, it's not good to see. I don't care who it is. It's like, dude, just play the game. All right. Just play the game. And I feel bad for defenders because, like, playing Mahomes, you're like, okay, they're more likely to throw them than, the Jalen Hurts never gets these. So, he's running on 3rd and 8. He's going full speed. And it's like, you're about to hit him, but you're like, he's probably going to slide. But then again, he might not slide. And you got to make a decision if you're going to give up the first down or you're going to get a penalty and give up the first down. But either way, you're giving up something.
Yeah.
And I feel like anytime the game turns into a position that's unbeatable, that's why they were talking about canceling the tush push, is because they're like, yeah, we can't really prevent this play from getting 1 yard.
Yeah.
And that's why other teams are doing it now. So I do think down the road that's going to go. But I think this is borderline getting to the point where like a defender can't really win against this. And then you add the flopping on it and it's like, okay, like this is already impossible. Don't do that. Okay. Like you're already like, they're already playing handicapped, like golf handicap, like one leg tied behind their back. Like,
yeah.
What do you, and now you're going to do that kind of stuff. It's like, dude, I mean, if you can't benefit from the rules the way they already are, like, I don't know what to tell you. You're supposed to be the greatest of all time. Don't do that.
And one of the things that really kind of like pisses me off that I've been hearing kind of recently is, and we know this, the NFL refs are not full-time refs. That is not their job. A lot of these guys are like, I don't know, teachers, they're managers at a store. It's crazy what these guys do. That is their actual full-time job, and they do this part-time, which I guess I understand. It's like it's either Thursday night, a Sunday, or a Monday, and of course you're going to sprinkle in Christmas games, Saturday games, whatever. That NBA refs, when they are about to ref a game, they get together pregame or the day before a game, and they're like, "Hey, these two teams are coming up. This player, he was doing a lot of this." So we're going to be very strict on him not doing this, causing fouls, whatever it may be. This player or this team maybe didn't get enough calls here. So we do have to prioritize making sure that they get those calls because we do have to add some sort of balance to these plays being called. So I think that would be one of the solutions because
makeup calls.
Well, not even necessarily makeup calls. It's the idea of, and they do this over the off season where they redo the kicking, the kickoff rules. They redo this rule. They implement this. They take this one away. You need those full-time refs doing this full time. You need these guys to see that, hey, Mahomes here, he could have just gone out of bounds. Instead, in that half second of deciding whether he's going to go out or stay in, he stayed in. This guy, defender, pushed him out legally. And guess what? There was a flag. We can't call that anymore. If we, as refs, in our purview, in our area of view, when we're seeing that, if we see that happen, guess what? We're not throwing the flag because that is borderline bullshit. Because what is the defender supposed to do?
Why can't New York tell them? I don't get it.
That as well. Yeah.
It makes no sense. Like, why can't New York I'm not saying on every single penalty, false start, all that stuff, you can do that on the field. If you get one wrong here and there, whatever. But these 15-yard penalties should all automatically be, I mean, we have personal fouls, expedited review. It's a matter of 5 seconds. How many times do you see referees huddle up and talk for a full minute before they tell you the penalty? I mean, they act like they don't have the time for 10 seconds. It's bullshit. What's the real reason that we can't immediately improve the quality of football by having people that have 50 angles at the play tell you in your ear whether it is or isn't a penalty? You still need to be on the field to throw it's not like you don't have a purpose anymore if they do it that way. So it makes no sense why the NFL hasn't pivoted towards making the NFL just a better game. And like you said, full-time refs, they would also have files on players and they would have trends. They would know, okay, this player can do this. This one, gets a lot of penalties likes to hold. They could make this a full-time thing and these refs could be amazing. And then you add in replay assistants from New York and dude, think of all the bitching that happens every single game. Like that can't be good for the NFL. And they have the means to do it. So I don't understand it at all. Like
and real quick, just to get back to the game, because I did have a question for you on the Texans side. CJ Stroud obviously didn't have a great game. He was getting fucking sacked. He was getting chased all game. And going back to what I said earlier, 2 years in the league, 2 playoff appearances. How moving forward, looking towards the future with the Texans, like, can CJ Stroud, do you think CJ Stroud will become a Super Bowl quarterback at one point? Because it's the biggest point is the offensive line. It is really the biggest struggle for him right now. It's been so for his first 2 years in the league. But even so, he has won the division and he's won 2 playoff games. He's lost 2, but he's also won 2 playoff games, which is crazy to think about. So, like, moving forward with this early somewhat success, like, is CJ Stroud going to be a Super Bowl quarterback?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the year he had last year was, I think, what everybody needed to know. This year, everyone's like, oh, he's having his sophomore slump. I'm like, there's a lot more that's going into it than that. And to say that is to, I guess, take something away from CJ Stroud that I don't believe is fair. The offensive line has been bad all year, and the play calling hasn't been any better because they continue to call plays that take 7 seconds to develop when they know Stroud only has 3 to 4 seconds in the pocket. So there's a lot of things that have gone into the sophomore slump, but CJ Stroud, under those circumstances, still had this team at 10 wins, still won a playoff game. And yeah, like when they get a better offensive line and they're almost there, they lose Tank Dell and they lose Stephon Diggs. So they're out there with just Nico Collins and Xavier Hutchinson. Shout out Xavier. But I mean, like, that wasn't it. That wasn't the plan when we went into this year. So, but CJ Stroud, man, he is the real deal. Like, he is. He's a competitor. He loves the game. He's really good at it. He has that will to win. And eventually, I think they're getting really close. I think it could be next year. I really do. They're in their window. And that's what I think about CJ Stroud is some teams have a quarterback and you're like, they're in a 4-year window. Like maybe you could say with Sam Darnold and the Vikings, you're like, I don't think Sam's like this amazing quarterback, but I think with all these pieces, we can get it done. And then you have your quarterbacks where it's like Joe Burrow, where it's like their Super Bowl window's their career. And those are different type of quarterbacks. And I think CJ Stroud, Josh Allen. I would put CJ Stroud in that group right now.
Okay.
And say the Texans are going to have Super Bowl opportunities for, the next 10. It might be like Josh Allen. Look how long it's taken him to get here. And he might not even, we'll see what happens. But, just because your career is a Super Bowl window doesn't mean you'll win more than one like Drew Brees. So we'll see.
Exactly. Or even Drew Brees. Who was it? Oh, no, Roethlisberger won 2. Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I was going to say too. Like, as Texans fans, I'm sure there's a sense of grateful, Texas fans, because you went from, Deshaun Watson, his last year of whatever the fuck that was in a Texans uniform, to like two years of like mediocrity. And then you get CJ Stroud in the playoffs and you get CJ Stroud in the playoffs again. Like, there's definitely Texans fans who are grateful about that. But I also think there is a sense of like frustration too, this second year, because they won an extra game and they go into the playoffs with a home game and they lose to the Chiefs in kind of a bad way. So I can see why Texans fans would be frustrated. But I'm just like, not with the Bears, but as in general, I'm an optimist, just not with the Bears most of the time. But I could be an optimist for the Texans, because it's like, look, you've got some things to clean up. There are some, rough edges on that offensive line and maybe in the team as a whole. And maybe the offensive coordinator Slowick, has to understand that kind of what we were talking about is like, you need 4-second plays, not 7.5 to 8-second plays. You need 4-second plays to keep the ball moving. But there should be a sense of optimism in Houston in terms of moving forward with this team as a Super Bowl contender within the next 5 years. And I do believe CJ Stroud, kind of what you're saying, with the Joe Burrow, with the Josh Allen, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, is like that window is their career. It's just what can you do in the offseason to get to the postseason? Because you can win in the postseason and that's awesome, but you got to get in the postseason first. So how do you get there, and how good of a team are you to move forward? I just think the Texans are, like you're saying, they're an offensive line and probably a couple more pieces away, maybe just staying healthy at the wide receiver end as well. And we got Nick. What's up? Did you see Bears signing offensive coordinator Russell Wilson? Absolutely not. Didn't see that one, Nick. But what's up?
Yeah, and D'Amico Ryans could face a fine because after the game he said, we knew going into this game it was us versus everybody.
Yeah.
When I say everybody, it's everybody.
It's everybody.
It was very, very, very subtle. But I think because of that, I think the fans are going to be happy because they have someone to blame, and it's not D'Amico Ryans this year.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, that was our divisional matchups. Thursday, we're going to be bringing you guys our championship Sunday prediction. But for now, Kyle, I think it's time for the motherfucking.
Welcome to the Chives with Kyle.
Let's get it.
All right, there it is. The Patriots expected to hire former assistant Josh McDaniels as the next offensive coordinator. It's a great move. Josh McDaniels, terrible head coach. Offensive coordinator, he's been good at it with Tom Brady. Hard to tell with great quarterbacks. Is it Josh McDaniels or is it? I mean, I got to believe that Josh McDaniels is just a better coach when he has less on his plate. And Mike Vrabel, the head coach. And I think one thing you can say about this roster that they're building, the coaching staff, is that they're putting people in where you kind of know what you're going to get. There's not anything really about Mike Vrabel that's a mystery. And I feel like Josh McDaniels going to a familiar place. He knows the building. I feel like all that's going to be a huge benefit to him. So I actually like the hire. And I think this is a really good move for New England. I think they're putting themselves on a fast track back to relevancy. So good hire by the Patriots. I like their head coaching hire even more. Yeah. But yeah, those are my chives today.
Yeah, Josh McDaniels, like you said, awesome offensive coordinator, terrible head coach. Vrabel was always going to be the guy in New England after they got rid of Gerard Mayo. So I agree. Great hire in terms of offensive coordinator for Josh McDaniels. You guys who know the Patriot way very, very well. So that is going to be it for us here. Thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate everyone that was here. We had Nick in here a little bit late. We had Rod who subscribed. Shout out to Rod. We had Ginger in the chat. We had Derek, Brandon, Daniel Barry, and of course our boy Lil E in the chat. Thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate it. Go follow us on X at And Now Rick and at NFL with Kyle. Go follow the Only Football Podcast page at Only Football Pod. Make sure to hit a like on this stream before you guys go. Hit that subscribe button, hit that share button. Follow us on Twitch and on X. We would really, really appreciate it very, very much. Nick saying, night everyone, the Bears will win a Super Bowl if they make Russell Wilson the OC. If that's all it takes, I'll do it. I would support that if that's all it takes. But thank you guys.
Do you guys know if Bill's okay?
I sent him a DM. He hasn't responded, and so did Lily. So we will see soon, but I do hope he is good. Bill is one of our guys.
I've been checking Tom Grassi's posts. I'm like, is Bill in here?
We need Bill back. Somebody DM him too.
We gotta get Bill back. He's not even in Tom Grassi stuff. I'm like,
oh my God,
I'm
he better
really
be okay.
concerned about Bill.
Honestly though, yeah, because I sent him a message. I was like, hey man, just checking in. I haven't seen your last few streams. Just making sure you're good. You know, hit me back or whatever. So hopefully Bill is good and he will be back with us soon. Hopefully it's just maybe he's just a little sick and that's it, and then he's got to come back. So we're hoping the best for Bill to be back. But other than that, again, thank you guys so much for being here. We will see you guys again on Thursday for our Championship Sunday predictions. And Kyle, always a good time, brother.
Always a good time.